Good. So in regionalized countries, we're talking about the UK, Italy, and Spain. Regions are actually influencers of national politics. But in many countries, in most countries, these are spenders of public money. These are borrowers of money as well. They provide key public services to the citizens, and they're implementers of decisions they take themselves, but also implementers of decisions taken elsewhere by the national level and also by the supranational level. So for this, it was very interesting, and you can think of clear examples in the middle of the crisis, the Spanish government complaining about regional spending because regions account for a third of national public spending in Spain, and therefore national government blaming the region, saying we're missing EU targets because of regional spending. So we think it's a pity that the regional level has been mostly overlooked, and it leads us to our main subject of inquiry, that we know very little about the elites populating this level of government and administration, which leads us to two research questions. One of them is more descriptive. Who are these people and what are their preferences in terms of economic policy making, in terms of a division between a more free market and a more state intervention? Second, more analytical question, where do their preferences come from and by what have they been shaped? So this is a bit what we're interested in. In terms of explanations, we're filling a research gap. So we borrowed heavily from theories of preference formation. This is literature which is very developed in economic voting, electoral behavior, etc. And we borrowed from this literature 4 types of explanations to understand where do these preferences come from and by what are they shaped. The first type of preference has to do with early life socialization, to get a grip on these preferences in terms of economic policy making. We can open the black box of early life socialization in different ways. We propose 4 avenues. First, the kind of generational birth cohort, and this taps in with the work of Inglehart about a progressive linear shift from more materialist values which emphasize economic security to more post-materialist values which emphasize autonomy and self-expression, which resonate a bit better with free market logics, we think at least. Socialization also happens at home, domestically. What do your parents do? And we think maybe if your parents work in a public administration, you've been socialized into thinking that government intervention is a good way of regulating the economy. You might have inherited post-communist legacies, which might affect your preferences on this economic question. And finally, this is more Scandinavian colleagues pushing us always for a gender perspective. I don't believe in a dichotomy between men and women on this issue, but it's there in the literature, so we're kind enough to test it. Second type of explanation after early life socialization, what we call educational pathways. And by what we mean by this, non-politically correct, is university brainwashing, basically. What we think is that economics degrees are very good at producing people who believe very strongly in the virtues of the free market, not very surprising. We also have expectations for people who graduate from a law or public administration degree, which might favor a bit less free market solutions. Not so clear for other categories. Our reference categories, humanities broadly defined. Third type of explanation, interest. And there we try to tap into professional self-interest. So we ask these bureaucrats by what they were motivated. And we think that if they're motivated by job security, maybe the free market is not so attractive for them. If they're motivated by career opportunities, maybe they're a bit more interested in the introduction of free market solutions to economic governance problems. But we also think that they will update the perception of their interests according to context, especially how badly their region has been hit by the economic crisis. And a very clear indication of how badly it has been hit, this is unemployment level. So we think if your economic prospects are rather bleak, as reflected by the unemployment levels in your region, maybe you're not so interested in introducing more free market logics. Final explanation, again tapping into the idea that the context matter in terms of capacity, the capacity of the region. We thought the quality of the government of the region might matter, and also its degree of competencies or decentralization. So these are the 4 main types of explanation: early life socialization, educational pathways, professional self-interest, and more context-driven, the regional capacity of these bureaucrats. Data, as I said, I'll be brief. There's no publicly available data on these questions, so we collected our own. This is a telephone interviews of these elites, and we interviewed a bit more than 700 of these people in their own native language in 63 regions, and you can see a list of 11 countries with what we hope is a decent geographical spread. And what we asked them to try and capture this tension between two visions of economic policy making, on one hand free market, on the other hand government intervention, a very simple standard question. We asked them, looking at economic policy, some would like government to intervene actively on economic policy issues. Others might have other preferences, they would rather rely on free market forces. Where would you place your own vision of economic policy making on a range between 0, a greater role for government, and 10, a greater role for the market? These results, we can display them there. You see the red circle is the mean value on this 0 to 10 scale. Our bureaucrats are overall quite balanced across our 11 countries. However, what is interesting is the number below the mean, which is the standard deviation, which gives you an idea of the heterogeneity of these preferences. So there's actually quite a lot of variation to be explained in the preferences of these bureaucrats across the 63 regions and 11 countries. I won't say too much about the other descriptives, just a few things. 70% are men, so if anybody in this room thinks we've achieved gender equality, we can go back home and think about it. These are men in their early 50s. They have a variety of degrees. They're more or less equally motivated by job security and career opportunities. And just as a methodological note, we didn't force them to choose one category over the other. You could be motivated equally by job security and by career opportunities, or motivated by none. This was fine. A few more descriptives. You'll notice the unemployment level, which varies enormously at the regional level, between 2.5% unemployment in Tyrol, this is basically no unemployment at all the way to 30% unemployment in Andalusia, which is a very high level. Methods, again, I'll be very brief. Just first point, two things. First point, the data is strongly multi-level in its structure. Individuals are clustered in regions and are clustered in countries, so we implement a three-level random intercept model, which is the simplest possible way of modeling this. Second one, I'll be even briefer. We've implemented a Bayesian approach. I'm getting very excited about Bayesian methods, so if you have any question about this, please ask. Don't hold back in a Q&A session, but I'll skip it for now because of time. What do we find? I'll first present the individual level effects. What we find is not surprising. I'll try to point and hold the microphone at the same time. This is economic degree. Unsurprisingly, economic programs produce people, in this case bureaucratic elites, who think that free markets is much better than anything else in terms of governing the economy. Career opportunists as well have a preference for the free market. Men and women, you can see there's no real gender differentiation. One funny aspect, home socialization. If your parents work in the public administration, they produce these schizophrenic children, you can see that they're more or less equally distributed between government intervention and free market logic, so I'm not sure what's going on at home there. Last two individual level factors, job security, of course, more associated with a preference for government intervention, and the age of your birth cohort. And there what we see is that the older the birth cohort, the stronger the preference for state intervention. So we can link this to Inglehart's materialist to post-materialist argument, and we also think that there's something with being born in the era of welfare state creation, expansion, and consolidation. And we think that this shapes the preferences of these individuals in a number of ways, but also beyond social policy, and it spills over into economic policy making. So it's something we would like to explore even further in the future. One but last slide. These are the contextual level variables. I'll ask you for now to ignore the three first terms, which are the variance components at each level, and the regional authority indicator, to focus on the last three. The last three, what we find is that if you've got a post-communist legacy, at the elite level, you have a thirst for the free market. You've been deprived from a free market experience, and now you want it. At least at the elite level, it's something happening differently at the population level. And the last two, which for me are really the most interesting findings about unemployment and quality of government. The higher the unemployment level, the less the belief in the free market as a guiding principle for economic governance. And this tells us that the harder the region has been hit by the crisis, the smaller is the belief of the elites in the free market. The economy has let them down, and they're not turning towards the economy as a solution to these economic problems. What is more interesting even is that the quality of government has the same effect. The higher the quality of government in your region, the less you're interested in turning towards the free market to solve your problems. This is interesting because in the sample, quality of government and unemployment are negatively correlated, which means that usually high unemployment regions have low quality of government and the converse. And there we see two elements which are negatively related in the sample but have the same effect. So something very interesting is going on here. To conclude, I'll be very brief. What we find is that individual level factors matter, but actually contextual level factors matter even more. And what is my take-home message at the end of the day? What do I learn from this? What would be my policy implications? Well, I would say it would be the following. If I'm a politician and tomorrow I want to implement free market reforms, what do I do based on this research? I do the following. I stack my regional administration with young economics graduates who are career-driven. And I start this process with Eastern Europe. And this is, if I do this, I expect least resistance to my free market reform agenda. I'll expect a lot more resistance from high unemployment regions or regions which have a high quality of government. I'd like to close this with just thinking a bit more about the implications of this in terms of thinking what type of policies come from what type of institution, because we can expand the study of regions to other non-central government institutions such as regulatory agencies. We can think of international organizations such as the IMF, the World Bank, etc. And I find this interesting in terms of thinking, why do certain institutions propose certain policies, and why are certain policies better or less well implemented? And I think we can learn a little bit by having a look at who is populating these different institutions. Thank you very much for your attention.